Hey, everybody, On the Run with Beards and Dunn is back. And we have a guest this week. And if you don't know who this guest is, I would be amazed because we have Greg Meyer. And Greg and I have a little bit of a common thing in that we both ran for Brooks at one time. And Greg probably doesn't know that. But anyway, I did get a little shoe
I have
contract.
the picture.
I have, yes, I sent you the picture. I wanted to prove to him I wasn't just BSing him, making this stuff up. But Dick introduced me to Will Elbers at Grandma's in 1982. We rode to the starting line. Dick had a limo, and I was attached to Dick's hip. Kind of like, I don't know, Greg, if you ever shepherded some young runner who didn't have the notoriety you did, but you got him into the places and the things, and Dick was my mentor that way. And so whenever Dick made a move at a major race, I was glued to his hip, and I got to ride up to the start.
He always referred to you as a lamprey stuck to the side of the fish.
Actually, if you ever watch the movie, what was the movie, Dick, with Rhonda Provost always talked about it, was with the great racehorse.
Not Grumpy Old Men.
Oh, God, it just, not Secretariat. Who was the other one?
Oh, yeah, Seabiscuit.
Seabiscuit.
Was it Sea?
Was it
Yeah.
Seabiscuit? Yeah, great movie.
Black Beauty.
Well, no, Seabiscuit. Great movie about a racehorse that would never it was injured, came back, kind of the Dick Beardsley story. And they had a horse named Pumpkin who would calm Seabiscuit down. And whenever they took Seabiscuit to a race, they'd take Pumpkin along because it kept Seabiscuit happy and calm because he had his little buddy with him or
There
something.
you go.
Anyway, and so Will got to know me, and he said, well, what, I ran a 219 up at that point. And he goes, hey, would you like to be on the Brooks racing team? He might as well have said, would you like $1 million? Because at that point, you know, getting a shoe contract in the early 80s was like gold ticket. You won the golden ticket. And so for a couple of years, I got to wear the Brooks logo and all that kind of stuff. It was a lot of fun. And then, of course, I was happy to be at Boston in 83 when Greg Meyer was like the last American winner until Meb came along, and I can't remember, 2014, I think it was, to win the Goddamn Boston Marathon. And it was such a joy, Greg, to be there that day, to be part of I wouldn't say part of the scene, but I remember at the finish afterwards, they had a reception room that Brooks runners were invited to and all the dignitaries. And I'm sure you were in there somewhere buried amongst that group of people, but I had such a good time just hanging out and being kind of part on the edge of that excitement. And so I am so excited to have you here. And I know Dick has a little introduction he wants to do, but before I go to that, I have a question, Greg. In 1982, you did not run Boston. I know you ran it in 81, I believe. Where were you at in 82 when when Dick and Alberto hooked up? Were you at Boston then?
Yeah, I was living in Boston at the time, and I remember watching the race at the finish, cheering for Dick.
That's my question. I told Dick, I'm going to put him on the spot. Who was he cheering for? Who are you rooting for?
That's not a lie. I think a lot of people, including Alberto, underestimated him, and I think we wanted to see the underdog because he was pretty confident coming in. And
yes, he was.
Yes, he was. And Dick, you ran his ass into the ground.
Well, Greg, us Midwestern boys, we stick together, man.
We do.
So, Dick, what do you have to say about Greg Meyer? Anything you want to share?
Well, other than that, you know, he's one of the most accomplished runners and one of the nicest guys, and back in the day, one of the biggest jokesters in a good way that I've known in a long, long time. And I know Greg and I think we I shouldn't say locked horns. I know we both ran Bobby Krim a few times. I never won it. Greg, did you ever win Bobby Krim?
I won it in 78.
Yeah. 78. Because I got fourth, and I think in 81 and 82 or something like that. And
the Herb Lindsay years.
No, Greg, yeah. So, and Greg, you're one of the few people, and Mike and I were talking about this just before you came on, is your range. You know, you're a sub 4 minute miler and a 209 flat marathon. And I want to talk about that a little bit, about that 209 flat and just, down the road. But what a range. I mean, it's incredible. So did you start out more as a middle distance runner or like a miler and then just kind of work your way up? Tell us kind of, first off, how you got involved in running and then kind of your up the ladder kind of a deal.
Well, I think like all of you, we got started in high school and you just progress. And um, getting to college, I think I ran everything from 800 meters up to 10,000 meters, depending on where they needed me.
Sure.
You know, mostly the 800 would be on the 4x8 relays. Um, but I don't know. When I was younger in grade school, I was relatively slow, but somehow worked on my speed. But, I think it's just one of those things that I never really focused on one thing. I just wanted to be a better runner, and
Yeah.
that meant doing whatever you needed to do for the team. Um, After college, I think, we started to focus a little bit more um, on the distances, especially as we got into the road racing, because
Yes.
everything then was probably, for the most part, was 10K and above. There weren't a lot of 5Ks out there.
No.
So, between, the 10K half marathon, those kinds of things, it just progressed into moving your range farther and farther up. But, really moving to Boston, I'd never thought of running a marathon until I was in Boston for over a year.
And Greg, did you move to Boston to did you work with Coach Squires at the time, and were you part of the Greater Boston Track Club? What got you out there to Boston to live and train?
Bill Rogers, Randy Thomas, we met at the World Cross Country Championships in the spring, and Bill and I hit it off for some reason. And
Yeah.
then Randy was doing some consulting work in addition to his running for New Balance.
Right.
And so during that summer, Randy got me a shoe deal. I still remember my mom wanted me to take a teaching job. And then all of a sudden, these little checks started showing up. I remember I think it was like $100 a week or $108 a week. And my mom
This
goes,
was
"Oh
New
my
Balance.
God. What are
New
you
Balance,
doing?"
right?
Huh?
New Balance, right?
New Balance.
So
yep.
we talking like
Yeah.
So I
six,
think my first
7,000,
contract was $8,000 a year.
Okay.
And then Billy wanted me to move out and train with him. So he gave me a job in his store.
Yeah.
So that fall, I moved out right before the Freedom Trail run, the old Freedom Trail run, and
Sure.
worked in Billy's store. I would get there in the morning, do some work. He would show up. We'd do our morning run. I'd go back to work. He'd go sit in his office and eat bonbons. And then we'd go for our second run later in the day. So that's how I ended up in Boston. But I didn't really end up running the marathon until you remember the great Tommy Leonard from the
Yeah. Wonderful person.
Yeah. So Billy and I were racing with a bunch of other people, Robbie Perkins and most of the Greater Boston people and others.
Probably Vinnie Fleming.
Vinnie Fleming, the whole
Remember
gang.
Vinnie?
But
Yeah.
it was a bigger race. It was, remember the old Diet Pepsi series?
You betcha.
So they had the Heartbreak Hill Diet Pepsi race. So you were out and back over the hills.
Oh wow.
And I ended up beating Billy that day and setting the American record for a 10K. And we were at the Elliott Lounge afterwards. And Tommy Leonard, as he's always so gracious and nice,
Right.
was so excited. He said, someday you're going to be as good as Vinnie Fleming, And I'm like, well, Vinnie Fleming was 10th in Boston. They equated everything to
Sure.
the marathon. It's
Right.
I mean, you could have won a gold medal somewhere else.
Exactly.
But what's your marathon time? And that was
Yeah.
the instigation to actually think about running a marathon. So yes, it was somebody insulting me in a bar.
Reminds me, when you tell somebody you're a runner, and they'll go, "Oh, really? Do you run marathon?" And you'll go, "Well, I've even run marathons." They'll go, "Have you run Boston?" And if you say no, they kind of give you the like, "Well, then you're not really a runner. You're not really a marathon runner if you haven't done Boston." That's cool.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, people, there's a certain badge of honor that goes with qualifying for Boston.
I do have to mention, Greg mentioned the American record. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think in your career, because I did a little research on you, 10 American records, 2 world bests or records as you would in your career.
Yeah, I was pretty lucky.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, there was one point, and it's sort of, the little things you remember that make you smile later on in life as you get older. but there was a point in time where I had every road record from 5 miles to the 25K. So I had I had the 5 mile, the 10K, the 15, the 20 and 25K.
That's commendable.
Didn't last but a year, but for that moment in time, I had them all.
Yeah, that's just unbelievable.
So the marathon, though, it kind of, I don't know if the challenge was thrown out there, or the seed was planted, but your first attempt was pretty successful, if I remember correctly. Was it in Michigan?
What's that?
What was your first marathon?
Detroit.
Yeah, and you.
And Bill Squires was coaching me, and I remember, that's where Dick and I share a lot of memories.
Right. Oh my.
Oh my. And I have a funny story about him later, but
we'll save it.
Yeah. But we talked about wanting to go to a race that wasn't New York or Boston, get a feel for the distance, but also treat it like a race that you expected to win. So many guys go into these races and they're happy when they come out 6th or 8th and go, oh, that was pretty good. He wanted me to understand that you race it to win.
You bet.
Yeah,
that's the way he was.
Yes, it was. And it worked. I think I ran 2:13:07 for my debut marathon.
So Greg, what did you feel? So you first marathon, you win it, you run 2:13, which, back then was a solid time, So when you got done, were you excited? Were you thinking, man, I don't know if I want to even do another one of these? What was your feeling, after you celebrated winning the darn thing?
Well, it like any athlete, Dick, and you know this, you're always looking for the next thing.
Right.
And the next big thing for me was trying to run Boston. So that was in 1980. So 81 Boston. I thought I was in decent shape. That was year Seiko and Craig Virgin and Billy. It was a good field. And
right.
But you go in with all the same instincts. What do I need to do to win? And I remember taking the lead going into the hills, the Braeburn, the first Braeburn Hill at about 30 kilometers. And I remember taking the lead going up into there. And mentally, I thought, okay, you're doing the right things. But I wasn't prepared for what those hills did to me. And by the time I got halfway through the hills, Seiko and Billy and all of them went by me like I was one of the light poles. So, well, what was funny is
I'm not laughing at you. I love the analogy part.
Well, what was amazing was I stumbled home in the exact same time I ran in Detroit, 2:13:07.
Oh my!
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
but and that was your second marathon.
Yeah, but what you did was you learned what you needed to do. It's like sometimes you got to get in the game and get your butt kicked before you understand what it is you need to do in training to really be ready.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Wow.
So what did, so you come off that, not a positive, I'm guessing, you had mixed feelings that you were disappointed, but again, 2:13 and stumbling home, I'd take that stumble any day, but anyway, you get right back into your training, get right back into your racing mode and start reformatting. You and Squire sit down and talk it through.
Yeah. It's like anything else. You sort of get back on the horse and get training. And then I didn't run a marathon for a while until I guess 82 Chicago. I spent a lot of time training, doing a lot of great racing mid-range, 10K, 15K, 20, 25K.
Yeah, and crushing people.
Yeah. But also, doing those long runs with Billy. And for a period in there, I wasn't training with Coach Squires anymore. I was coached by Bob Seveny.
Oh, sure.
And then Bob Seveny went back to, he took the job with Nike to head up Athletics West. And I was sort of motivated to go back to the marathon again. So I went back with Squires. But by that time, Billy recognized what I needed in the training to not only get me fit, but to get me mentally right. And we did a lot more intense interval workouts than like the Greater Boston Track Club was used to doing. When I got there, they'd do all these repeat miles at 5-minute pace. My God, it was like watching paint dry. Because that wasn't what I came up out of college. And
Right.
hard hill workouts, and I give Squires a lot of credit because he adapted things for me, and for a short period of time it worked. You know, so yeah, it's
Well, as long as we were just mentioning Squires here, tell it. You said earlier you had a little story you wanted to tell about Coach Squires.
well, you knew that Coach Squires had his own language.
Oh, for sure.
He rarely finished a sentence before he was moving on to something else.
Yeah.
And then his hand gestures, and and I remember we were sitting around our kitchen table one night with Mike Roach, who was 76 Olympian.
Yeah.
And my wife and I, and we're sitting around talking. And I remember my wife saying to Mike, he said, I'm starting to worry about Greg because he actually understands what Squires is saying. And I'm like, oh God, this is trouble.
Greg, when I first started working with Coach, I live in Minnesota, he'd send me my workouts. I'm not kidding you. Once a week on the back of a beer stained napkin from the Elliott Lounge. And it took me a month or so, to figure out what all this stuff meant. But then it was like Morse code. If any other runner got a hold of it, they never knew what it was. But the guy would give, as you know, Coach Squires would give you the shirt off of his gosh dang back.
I just remember, when we were getting ready for Boston, and I was doing some of these fartlek 20 milers on my own.
Yeah.
And it'd be raining, and he'd be out there standing. He'd be out there. He'd drive his car and meet me in Wellesley or, Newton Lower Falls. I mean, the guy just gave and gave and gave. But he was goofy too in that.
Oh, yes, he was.
We would do our indoor workouts. We would sneak into Harvard, and he would come in and he'd bring that Boston Herald in with him, and he'd sit in a chair, and you'd run by, and he would read off splits, never looking at his watch, and we'd look down and go, he has no idea what we're running, and I don't think he ever cared.
No. Oh, no, he had his own way of coaching, but boy, if he took you into his grip, and I mean, if Coach Squires would have told me, Dickie, before you run Boston, right before the race, I want you to go up to a telephone pole, whack your head 10 times, I would have done it,
Yeah. I mean, his success, you look at Bill Rogers, Randy, the whole gang of Greater Boston.
Yes.
I mean, Bobby Hodge was sub 211.
Yeah.
Randy was 211. You got Dickie Mahoney, a mailman,
right,
who's running 214. And it's like the man knew what he was doing.
He did. Yeah.
I got to tell you, Greg, I had Bill Squires at my house. We invited him out to the Black Hills Marathon in Rapid City. I was living out there, and I think we were going to get Dick. And Dick, you couldn't come, and you suggested, if you guys are bringing in
his appearance fee was too high.
Oh, Beardsley's fee was way too high. But and I think we gave Coach Squires $1,000 and he was like, oh, tickled pink, to get that. And we brought him in for the keynote address at the spaghetti feed sort of thing, and he did a great job. But I told the committee, I said, hey, we'll save some money. I'll put him up. And so my wife and I were living up in the woods, and Dick was there in that cabin way back in the Black Hills. And the night before I wasn't running the marathon, but we were going to go do color commentary or whatever. And so the night before I said, hey, Coach, you want to go for a little run? And he goes, yeah, that sounds great, Mike. But he goes, I can't run very far. And he dug into his duffel bag, and he pulled out the rattiest, old, beat up pair of running shoes I'd ever seen in my life. And my wife hates I'm not picking on Coach Squires. I love the guy to death. He had a toupee that was like shot. I mean, you could see the webbing and stuff in it.
It looked like they shot a squirrel and stuck it on his head.
Right.
But, when you said kind-hearted, when he left us, he gave me, mementos. He had a Helsinki 83, I think it was, a napkin or a handkerchief that was embroidered. And then he gave me like a key ring or something. It was just these little things he'd pick up, I guess, in his travels, and he'd give them to you. So that's a great story. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Hey, Greg, let's go back a little bit. So you were one of the main kind of people looking ahead as far as prize money goes and stuff. And was it the Cascade runoff where it was a prize money race and you decided, you and a few other runners, I can't remember who they were, you ran that and they said if you run it, you're going to be you'll be banned? Kind of, can you explain that part of that era?
Well, it started out earlier than the Cascade runoff. There was a group of us that formed back then what was called the Association of Road Racing Athletes.
That's right.
And Chuck Gelford was the attorney. Don Cardong, the Olympian, was part of that.
Yep.
Herb Lindsay, myself, a bunch of guys, bunch of people. Lorraine Moeller, Ann Audain, and we were pushing
big names.
Yeah, we were pushing for more a more equitable distribution of resources on the roads, because Billy and Frank would get pretty good appearance money,
right?
But it wasn't building our sport, and it wasn't helping those that weren't getting them. And Chuck Gelford was involved with Nike and the Cascade Runoff, and that, I think it's 1981 or 82.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was the first major prize money. There was a smaller race, the Jordache.
I remember that.
Yeah, that Tom Fleming won.
25 grand.
Yes.
So the Cascade Runoff was the first big prize money race. And I ended up winning that. Herb Lindsay was second. Domingo Tipitaweza was third, and Bill Rogers was fourth. It was actually one of the greatest races you'd ever watch. Now, I'm biased because I won, but I mean, there were four of us with about 600 yards to go, side by side by side.
Wow.
It's on YouTube.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
It's on YouTube, Greg, if you go there.
Huh?
I think it's on YouTube. There's
some
nice.
Footage.
Yeah.
But after that, we were banned for a period of time until they figured out the TAC trust system. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes,
So
I do.
You'd have to put your money into a trust, and you could withdraw money for training expenses and living expenses. That went on for a little while. And you mentioned Bobby Krim.
Right.
People don't remember that in the old days, if you ran against a professional, whether you took money or not, you became a professional. It was the contamination rule. So it goes back to the old English amateurism. So we showed up at the Bobby Krim race in '82, and you were probably there.
I ran that one, yes.
Yeah. And a group of British athletes went to Bobby Krim and said, Herb Lindsay and I and a few others, we can't run because they're professionals now. And at first, Bobby said, well, then they can't run. Lois Craig, who was the race director and also his sort of chief of staff, because he was Speaker of the House in Michigan, a Democrat from Flint. So the unions were important to him. And Lois, who unfortunately just passed away this spring, said to Bobby, you know that this is a union movement. Do you really want to be the one to tell them they can't run? And Bobby said, nope, I guess not. Whoever wants to run gets to run. And the minute they let us run, we contaminated about 8,000 people who would then go out and contaminate the world. So it blew the contamination rule right out of the water. The TAC trust system lasted maybe a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
And then, quite honestly, it led to open prize money and professionals in the Olympics.
I know.
Yeah.
All because of you and a group of a few other people. And that's so. Greg, what did you that first Cascade runoff when you won? What was your prize money that you won? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, $10,000.
Nice.
So it was 10 grand. And I was just getting early on in my marriage, and I spent $2,000 of it that I didn't have to put back into the trust. So I went to Billy one day and I said, Billy, I hate to do this, but can I borrow $2,000 for the TAC trust? He goes, yeah, no problem. Billy is the most wonderful guy in the world. So he gives me the $2,000. I give it to the TAC trust. So I'm all set. I'm back. And about a few months later, and Billy would throw me races that he couldn't go to.
Sure.
So I give Billy his money back, and he goes, "What's this?" I said, "Billy, you gave me money for this." And he goes, "Really? I did?" You know, I said, "Yes, Bill, you loaned me money."
Oh,
Because
God.
he was just a good-hearted
No,
person.
it absolutely
You know,
is.
Greg,
Oh,
we've had a few people comment on our podcast, and they love the openness. And Dick's pretty open about sharing. You know, and I think Americans are kind of that way. We'll ask about money, where in some cultures, like, oh, you never ask somebody about money. That's personal. That's, you don't want to pry. And you always have the right to say, I'm not going to tell you it's personal. But, you know, New Balance and their contract with them came to an end. How did you and Brooks get hooked up? I heard, and this is, you can kill this rumor or not, that you took a long term. You know, a lot of runners sign a 2-year deal, a 1-year deal, a 3-year deal is probably like, wow, that's pretty good. There, you got 3 years. That's, you know, like security. I heard yours was like a 20-year deal, but uh, straighten me out here.
No,
Straighten us out here.
no, no. It was actually better than that. No, no,
A lifetime
no.
deal.
Seriously, um, how I got hooked up with Brooks was Wolverine Worldwide is based out of West Michigan,
right.
and they were buying Brooks out of bankruptcy. I was about, and you can say I made a dumb decision or the right decision, but I was about to sign with Reebok, and I would have been the
Oh,
first athlete they signed in the U.S. Um, Steve Jones rode that for a long time,
yes, he did.
but they were from my hometown. I trusted the people there, and in my contract they said when I was done with my running career, I would have a place in management. You know, so
Wow.
I'd have a job, and I'm like, that's a pretty good deal. So
Yeah.
um, I think I had a 4-year. Well, my deal came up after Boston. I we obviously got a new deal, and I think it was a 4-year deal for a decent amount of money, not Salazar or Joni kind of money, but
Sure.
you know, good for me.
Right.
And during that, I started getting injured. So I went to them and said, listen, I'll take a pay cut for the next 3 years if you add a fourth year on it at that same level. So I basically bought myself a fourth year by reducing my salary in those earlier years.
Nice.
Yeah, but you know, quite honestly, Dick, I don't know how you feel, but as much as the marathon gave me, it destroyed me as a runner.
That's
Greg, that's what, you know, I remember, I think in 81 I ran 5,
world class.
80 I ran 4, 82, and I
You're
recovered
insane.
quickly. I know, but, and, our good buddy BJ, Gary Bjorklund, you raced him a number of times, I'm sure.
Oh, God,
And
yeah.
I remember BJ coming up to me one day. He goes, "Beards, man, you're on a roll, but listen, those marathons have a way of catching up with you." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, BJ, thanks." And it went in one ear and out the other. And I look back on it now, and if I would have been a little more, and but I'd get an invite to a marathon. So I go, "Coach," I go, "I got invited to the London Marathon." "Yeah, Dickie, go," and then 3 weeks later, I get invited to a marathon in Japan. Yeah, and I'm not blaming this on Coach, but at all.
No,
I was excited. I wanted to go, and I recovered quickly, but it does catch up with you, don't it, Greg?
it does. And I think, when we look back at our careers, um, I don't know if you're like this, but I remember the mistakes haunt me more than the victories are celebrated.
Sure.
It's like if I would have had this mindset back then, if I would have done this, I could have been good. I could have been better, and I think that's just the nature of who we are, as
Right.
athletes, that you always look back and go, God, I wish I wouldn't have done that, or gosh, I wish I would have done that.
Yeah. So, Greg, okay, 1983, Boston Marathon. Your training had been going well. You went in there obviously with the idea, as I did the year before, I want to win this thing. And tell us a little bit about that race, how it went, and then I got to ask you about the very end when you're coming down. Well, back then it was what was the name of that street back then
Hair,
that we?
oh my, Ring Road,
No,
Ring
Ring
Road.
Road. Yeah, Ring Road, and you're thinking, I'm gonna break 209. So anyhow, start from the beginning. Tell us about your prep for that race, how it went, the whole deal.
Well, starting with the fall before, I won Chicago. And that, set a pretty good tone in terms of confidence. But then over the winter, I raced well. I think I lost one race, and that was, I think, to Di Costella beat me when he set the world record for 15K, and I was right behind him getting the American record, but not the world record. A few weeks before, I set the world record for 10K at Cherry Blossom. So I was fit. I mean,
right.
I was really fit.
Yeah.
So, going into the race, it wasn't a secret that I was really fit. And I remember at the press conference, people asking, and what are you going to do? Lie to them and say, no, I'm not the favorite. I just, because I'm running good. And, it was one of those things where I said, I'm pretty fit. The plan is to win.
Right.
And it kind of pissed Benji Durden off. Benji, great runner, Olympian, I think, was a little taken back that I was being made the favorite and not pure marathoners, because I was more of a middle distance guy. And I think that little bit of anger that he had encouraged him to really pound the pace from halfway on, which was perfect for me. I thank him to this day because he made the race. And I've told people I always feel bad that he didn't get second because he did.
Because Ron Tabb did, didn't he?
Ron Tabb did. He picked up the pieces and ended up running a great race, 209.31, I think, for second.
Yeah.
But the race itself, it was pretty standard. You're in a big pack, and by the time you get to 10 miles, it's down to maybe 8 or 12 guys.
Yeah.
Then Benji took off after halfway. I think we came through at
104 flat.
104 and change. Yeah. And then
so when Benji took off, Greg, did you and anybody else go with him, or you kind of just let him go for a bit?
I let him go for a bit. He got about 90 meters on me, but there was a big gap between me and the next guy. We were on world record pace. He was hammering it in there, and I felt under control, but I didn't feel any need to get up on his shoulder at that point.
Sure.
Once we got to the hills, and again, you got to remember, I lived a mile off the course.
Right.
All of my long runs were on that course. I knew those hills like the back of my hand. I mean,
bet.
And it's where I felt comfortable and home. So once we got to that Brayburn Hill where I sort of died 2 years before, I started eating into his lead. And by the time we got between the second hill and Heartbreak, I had caught up with him. And then I sensed that he was struggling a little bit. And Squires, and I don't know if he told you, did he used to teach you to do fakes? Do these
all the time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you got to do this little fake. And then it's like you'll pick up, it'll get the pace going again. And then you can tuck back in and, relax and then surge again. And well, I did one of those little fakes and Benji didn't come with me. And I thought, it's time to go. So I was able to make a move going into Heartbreak. And it's funny, I've told people this, and I don't know if you did this or not, but in your training at times you visualize how a race is going to go. And don't ask me why, but for that particular race, I always saw myself coming off of Heartbreak Hill alone.
Wow.
And I remember during the race thinking, holy crap, I'm coming off alone.
Yeah.
And it was one of those feelings where, and I know Squires did the same thing for you. We never talked about how fast we were going to run. Never talked about it. It was how are you going to win?
Absolutely, Greg. It just gave me shivers you saying that, because I could have cared less if I ran 2:12 that day, but if I would have won it, that's all that mattered.
That's right. That's all that mattered. Bill Rogers would pound people in the middle and coast home. he didn't care about his time. He cared about winning,
No.
and
Right.
I think that's what's different about our era to this era. People are
Yes.
happy with placing, but not necessarily looking to win.
Right. So Greg, when you got you got to the top of Heartbreak, you came down the other side. How were you feeling at that point going through the 4 miles or so of hills?
Um, I was feeling pretty good because it's like any athlete in an event. The momentum was with me. You
Yes.
come off the hill and you're feeling like, okay, this is going according to script. Just keep it going. And I was always a nervous runner. I would look behind me. I don't know if you did, but
All the time, Greg.
it's one of those things where I just kept thinking, somebody must be coming.
Yes.
I'm not this good. Somebody must be coming.
Right.
And do you remember back in those days, Dick, where when you're running at Boston, they didn't have crowd control.
No, they're on top of you.
So after the lead truck would go through, the
Right.
crowd would go back in to see who was coming next. You couldn't
Yes.
see if anybody was coming.
No. And when I ran in 82, we must have had, when Selzer and I broke away and got off a Heartbreak, we must have had 75 bicyclers right behind us.
Yeah.
So if anybody would have been close trying to get, they would have had to go through all those bicycles.
Oh, craziness. Anyway,
Right.
so I went through Cleveland Circle, and with about 3 miles to go, I mean, I was still running like a little over 5 minute pace.
Yeah.
And a guy in the press truck yelled to me. I don't remember who it was, but he yelled, "Relax, there's nobody coming." And God, I dropped to 5:20s for the next 3 miles.
Did you really?
Honest to God. If you look at my last 3 miles, they were all in the 5:20s because
Right.
I won.
Enjoy it.
They just said, there's nobody coming.
So you had a 208 going.
Better than that,
Possibly.
maybe.
Yeah.
You know what? You don't know.
Yeah.
No.
But again, I never had a regret that I didn't run 1 second faster.
Right.
Didn't bother me at all.
No, you're the winner.
That's all that mattered. That's all that mattered. And
I'd trade you my 208.51 or whatever it was for your 209 flat, but having that laurel wreath on my head. That to me is the ultimate, Greg. When you came across there, know that you just won the Boston Marathon, and you think back to some of these incredible great runners that had already won this race but are dead and gone already. Man, it gave me shivers.
I think you and I both like the laurel wreath because we have no hair. But
right.
It's no, I think what's funny, Dick, is I still remember one of my first thoughts after crossing the finish line was life will never be the same again.
Right.
It's true. People see you in a different light. And even though you may know that wasn't your best athletic performance, it was the one that stood out that people noticed,
Absolutely. And Greg, being the winner, I mean, I know Boston treats the winners great, but I tell you, I don't think there's a second place runner that's got more bang for their buck than I have for not even winning the darn thing.
Well, I think part of that is because you pushed, the hometown kid right to the limit, so they have great respect for you.
Well,
that was one of the great races of all time. I mean, you guys battled right down the stretch. I mean, you don't see that very often,
No.
People thought Alberto was invincible. And I think you showed he really isn't.
Well, Greg, I've told this quick little snippet to that. So I remember I'm in the New Balance had brought me in a few days before, and I'm in the Sheraton Hotel, and I'm half asleep, and the news comes on, and in '82, and we're going to Logan Airport. Alberto Salazar just got off the plane, So they have all these microphones stuck in his face, and they go, "Alberto, why'd you decide to come and run?" He goes, "Well, I looked at the field, and I knew nobody had a chance against me." Man, I sat up in bed, and I thought, okay, buddy, you're not like invincible. That's what I was telling myself. I never told anybody else that. And Almost had him, not quite, but
Greg,
No, but
anyhow.
I tell you, he remembers that day, and it's like a boxer. I don't want any more. Ain't going to be no rematch, Rocky.
Greg, what was the
No,
post
no, that's
finish? The Walter Mitty and me dreams of winning the Boston Marathon. You get squired away to the lower levels of the parking garage, I believe, and they have a press area where they bring in usually
at
the
the
top
Prudential
three,
building.
the Prudential Center. And was Coach Squires your family? Can you give us? Do you remember?
Yeah, no, you remember it all. I remember my
Yeah.
wife and my daughter were there underneath, and you know, yeah, there was a curtain there, and um, Joni came up, and I remember it's the first time I saw Scott Samuelson because Joni all of a sudden jumped up and gave him a hug and a kiss. I thought Joni's got a boyfriend, um, but no, I remember the whole thing. I remember, the award ceremony, which still drives me crazy because everybody got these cool trophies with a big unicorn on top. I got a Seiko clock.
That's what, Greg, that's what I got too.
Yeah, I'm like, it's nice, but unlike me, it still runs. But
Was
but yeah, it's like, doggone, I would have liked one of those
how about
trophies.
Coach?
Yeah,
How
I
about
know
Coach
it. I
Squires?
hear
What
you.
is Coach Squires' reaction? Did you just was he pretty happy?
I didn't see his coach right away afterwards. I just remember thanking him because, and I remember at the press conference um, talking about it and just saying, Coach Squires had me ready. Records will come and go, but
Yes.
winning Boston will live forever. And
That's exactly right, Greg. Fast times, like you said, records come and go, but nobody can ever take that first place victory at Boston ever.
it's you know it's it's a great memory for me for sure. I don't, for the most part, a lot of people meet me and they have no idea, and that's just fine.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
But yeah, but deep in your heart, you know what? I did pretty good for a little Midwest kid,
Right.
as you did.
Yeah.
What is it about that Upper
I'm
Midwest,
just
Minnesota,
jealous that you're a better
Michigan?
fisherman
Yeah.
than me.
Well,
When you guys speak, I know I've heard Dick speak to this. Maybe you agree. Dick says, look at Minnesota, look at Michigan, the quality of runners that come out. You would think, man, California, Florida, they're going to have all these great athletes because they have the great weather. I think I know what Dick's thought is. Great, it just you got to be smart, you got to be tough. Any thoughts?
I you know I think Dick. I think there's a Midwest work ethic
Hmm.
that goes with
yes.
it. I think that when we're in the middle of winter, getting out the door is a decision that you
Right.
make over and over again. And I tell the athletes that I've coached in the past, you don't read a book to get mental toughness. You train for it just like you do the physical part of your sport. And every day that you make that decision to go out the door when you don't want to is building mental toughness. And
Absolutely.
you have to make that choice. I used to think, the kids from California, they had no excuse not to go out the door. It was always nice.
Right.
And they may have been great in high school and good through most of college, but we caught up, and when you look at
Absolutely
our
we did.
longevity, we lasted a pretty long time.
Yep.
Before we run out of time, and I know Dick and I bring this up with just about everybody we've talked to, super shoes. The rule, the
Yeah.
record book has been rewritten in the last 2 years or 3 or 4. It's hard to keep up. A lot of people say, well, the technology, you got to keep up with it. The problem I think Dick and I probably have, I don't know about Greg, I'm probably just jealous, but anything that propels you, I don't mind more cushioning. I don't mind lighter. But when I'm a bicyclist now, Greg. I got into cycling, my running career. I had to do something to keep from gaining weight. And so I've got aero wheels. I've got an aero bike frame. Yeah. You do everything you can to give you that advantage, but you can't put an electric motor on the darn things and enter a race because it's not you anymore.
Well, you can.
It's not you anymore.
No, but it bothered me at the beginning because I thought, you know what, it changes all the records.
Right.
But then I go back to my high school days and I used to pole vault. Well, in the old days, they pole vaulted with the Swedish steel pole, rigid as could be. Now they got fiberglass that shoots them up. You know, it just is what it
The
is.
tracks are better.
You know?
Right.
It's you know, they may someday come out and say, okay, we're going to go back and look at the old times and factor in what it would be in these new shoes and take 3.6% off every time. They're not going to do that because
no,
they're just not. They don't care. You know,
Greg, have you tried? New Balance sent me some a couple years ago, and just to try, and I put them on just walking. They were they you can't help but get kind of pushed forward, and when you're running them, they do spring you forward. They're amazing shoes.
Dick, you'll remember this. Remember the old days of Brooks where they had the carbon fiber plate in there in the shoe?
I don't remember that.
They couldn't perfect it. People, when they would try to, bend it, were getting plantar fascia because it was too much. And the carbon fiber in the shoes now isn't what's doing it. It's the foam. It's the technology in the foam. Yep. And so it's, we can whine about the good old days and this and that, but the reality is, you know what? It is what it is.
It is what it is. And Greg, listen, Mike and I cannot thank you enough. I mean, we could go on for a long, long time. And
okay, I got one story for you before you leave.
Please.
This may go to why I don't go fishing with you.
Okay.
As I remember, you got attacked by a pack of dogs.
Yep.
You got your leg wrapped around the crankshaft of a hay baler or something. Something else happened to you. And I remember
fell off a cliff.
I remember telling you one time, if I ever got up on a plane and saw you sitting there, I was walking off. And I kind of have that feeling about being on your charter boat.
Greg, knock on wood. I'm knocking on my head. Hopefully that's all quite a ways in the past now. But I'd love to get you out in the boat sometime, and I could tell you what, we'd have a ball. And I tell you, Dunn didn't grow up fishing. The only time he ever fishes is if he comes up to visit. But he catches
it's so
fish.
Much fun. It is such a good time.
Whereabouts do you fish, Dick?
So I live in Bemidji, Minnesota, which is about 230 miles north of Minneapolis. We're just south of the Canadian border.
Okay.
And we've got 400 lakes within 25 miles of town.
And what do you normally fish for?
So, like today, I had some people out. We were walleye fishing. We caught a bunch of walleyes. We caught a ton of northern pike, some big jumbo perch, and we had a good time.
Oh man,
do it,
man.
Yeah.
How deep are the walleye?
Right now, today the wind was blowing, and they were blowing into this cabbage weed area in about 8 to 10 foot of water.
Really?
So they were shallow. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, they were shallow. Well, have fun with your son this weekend walleye fishing. You have to give me a report on how you did, and we want to thank everybody, especially Greg. But thanks everybody for listening today. And if you have any questions for us or comments about the show, you can contact us directly at our website at beardsanddunpod.com, or you can leave us a comment on our Facebook, Instagram, or X, all at Beards and Dun Pod.
And we're on YouTube, and so if you go there, hit the subscribe or like and give us a comment. Greg, I do my sign off with Dick every week with Beards. Stay in the boat. Stay in the boat, because I'm afraid I'm going to hear about it. But Greg, thank you so much. I really enjoyed having this opportunity to get to chat with you.
Thank you, guys. It was great to be with you.
Have a great day, man.
All right. Thanks, buddy.